Welcome to the Freedom Lovin podcast, where we're building freedom in an unfree world. This is Kevin, and this is episode number 2. Wanted to apologize first about the last episode. There was a little sound quality issue. I've been podcasting on other topics for a few years now, and never have run across problems like that, but there was a little bit of static. So ongoing, it's going to be full speed ahead and clear communication here. So today I have a guest who is a good friend of mine, Bertrand of the Complete Liberty podcast. He also does happinesscounseling.com. And we're going to talk about what freedom is and why it matters, and also the idea of breaking free. So wanted to start out here the first few podcasts with just some philosophy and kind of the background, like what is it that we really need to be concerned with in terms of freedom and why it really is important. And then later I want to talk about what we can do, like more of the hows. So start with the whys and then go to the hows. And then more specifics of actually building freedom in your life. And just a couple things of what's going on with me in the next month or two. I've got the Bitcoin conference coming up in San Jose, California on May 17th. It's the 17th through the 19th. I don't know why we always say San Jose, California, as if it's going to be, I guess it could be Costa Rica. But you wouldn't say like San Francisco, California, because everybody knows where that is. So, and San Jose is actually a bigger city, but not quite as well known. So anyway, it's in San Jose, May 17th through the 19th. Really looking forward to that. Going to pick up some great info, I'm sure, on this new digital currency, Bitcoin, which I am. I've got some money invested. I got some U.S. fiat dollars invested in, but I'm also more interested in the idea of Bitcoin as a digital currency and what that means to kind of the world economy, because I think it's going to change a lot of things, and we're going to see in the next few years many people adopting digital currencies, and whether it's Bitcoin or another one, hard to say at this point, but I'm sure that this is going to be something that's here to stay. So it's kind of like email, it's kind of like the internet. I think where in a few years, if you're not up on it, you're really going to be falling behind on technology. Right now, it's really early on. So the people that know about Bitcoin and how it works and everything are pretty far ahead of the game. But I think I would say in 2 years, it's going to be a lot more mainstream, and people are really going to be using it. So I'm excited about that. And then tomorrow, which is Thursday, I am going to be going to the Bitcoin ATM launch. It's actually right here in San Diego. So I'm really excited about that because I think that's got a lot of potential. Once, if somebody can get ATM machines out there that exchange dollars for Bitcoins, I think that's it's going to be a game changer. So super exciting stuff. And then on June 1st, I'm quote unquote moving to Boulder, Colorado. I'm just shifting everything. I don't really have much in the way of furniture and things like that, so I can usually just go and get furnished apartments. So basically just picking up and going to Boulder, and I'm going to be there for 2 months. I'm working on getting an apartment there. Should have that in the next few days. And yeah, I'm just going to do a lot of hiking up there and living free. So looking forward to that. And then in July 5th through 7th, going to the World Domination Summit, Chris Guillebeau. So that's going to be so fun. And actually, I don't think I'm going to get a ticket to it. I don't have a ticket yet, but I've just heard that showing up and just hanging out and meeting people is just as good. So right now, I don't have a ticket, but that may change. I think that just being there, though, will be enough. So also, just one other thing wanted to add, if you're on Facebook, which I think almost everybody is on Facebook now, go ahead and go over to our page, and that's at Freedom Lovin Life. So it's just facebook.com/Freedom Lovin Life. And give us a like. So I'm posting a lot of stuff there and trying to get some interaction going, so that would be much appreciated. And then if you like the show, please give us a rating and review. I'm going to have that up in the show notes. So you just go to freedomlovin.com and go to this podcast, and you'll see the link there to iTunes. So you can give us a pop in there and give us your review and rating. Just take a couple minutes. That would be also much appreciated. Anyway, without further ado, here is my interview with Bertrand, and we'll talk to you soon. All right. Well, today I have a special guest on the show, and his name is Bertrand. He's a great friend of mine and also the host of the podcast Complete Liberty, and also an author of two books. One is called also Complete Liberty, and the other one is The Psychology of Liberty. Hey, Wes, welcome to Freedom Lovin.
Thanks a lot, Kev. Yeah, it's great to be on your show. You've been on my show a few times, and we, of course, did a show together, Healthy Mind, Fit Body, for 100 episodes, so it's great to be back.
That's right, and a lot of the topics kind of intertwine and just kind of mesh together, and it seems like it's kind of all goes back to the same thing in a lot of ways. Indeed.
Yeah, kind of self-knowledge, self-wisdom, self-healing, self-growth, all that inner journey stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you're talking from Hailey, Idaho?
Mm-hmm. Yep, just south of Sun Valley, Ketchum area, which is kind of known for skiing and recreating and stuff. A lot of people come up here to train too, high-altitude training.
That's right.
It's pretty nice.
Yeah, I'll be up in the mountains in, I guess, about a little over a month now, in Boulder, Colorado. So
yeah, that'll be cool too.
Yeah.
Probably real similar environment.
Yeah, I'm sure. Although I've heard it's kind of a hoity-toity, like kind of La Jolla-ish.
Yeah, Sun Valley is that way too. There's some, I think Clint Eastwood has a big home up here. Bruce Willis down here in Hailey. And I ran into Arnold Schwarzenegger one year in a boot store up in Ketchum. So,
right.
You tend to see some celebs in this area.
Nice. Yeah, good times. The Governor.
Yeah, he's made an appearance a few times on Complete Liberty podcast, by the way.
That's right.
So, for folks that are interested about that, it actually wasn't him. It was just his doppelganger. So,
right.
But he does come on occasion just to trying to explain himself. Usually my friend Mike is the one that's doing the interviewing, so...
Yeah, as he needs to be. He needs to explain himself. He's got quite a lot of explaining to do.
Certainly does. He's got a new book out. I guess he attempts to do some of that, but I don't know if he really gets down to the nitty-gritty stuff.
Yeah, exactly, which is what we're going to do today, right now. We're going to get to the nitty-gritty. So one of the things I wanted to cover was, you've been in this, kind of liberty freedom movement for quite a while, and so you've kind of got a handle on a lot of this stuff, and I want to talk about why do you think that freedom is important?
Yeah, why is freedom important? Well, it's a definite need that we have as humans, and unfortunately, we have the rhetoric in America about freedom, right? Baseball, apple pie, liberty and justice for all.
That's right.
So,
we live in the freest country on the planet, right?
Yeah, the freest, the best country on God's green earth, as Michael Medved would say.
Of course.
There's no end to the freedom rhetoric on the talk show hosts, right? The AM stations especially.
Let freedom ring.
So what is freedom? I guess we have to define that first before we figure out why we need it.
Right.
I read Atlas Shrugged about 20 years ago, and that really opened my eyes as to what freedom could be, ought to be, should be, in Aristotle's view. That art kind of portrays things as it should be or ought to be rather than as things are. So Atlas Shrugged, was a book that portrayed freedom in a new light for me, and especially the part about Galt's Gulch.
Right.
People could actually live without human sacrifice, because the credo is, I swear by my life and my love of it that I will not live for the sake of another man, nor ask another man to live for mine.
Mm-hmm.
And that seemed to make a lot of sense, because Rand's view was that we ought not sacrifice ourselves to others, nor ask others to sacrifice themselves for us. So it's an individualistic philosophy that honors, our own choice-making ability, our own decision-making ability, and that seems to be sort of the core aspect of human freedom as a need. The ability to make our own choices, to do what we want to do, not things that we don't want to do.
Right.
And unfortunately, we live in a world, a culture that's filled with all this domination thinking and thus domination institutions that tell us we need to do things or else we get punished. So we find ourselves doing things that we don't really want to do, but we tend to do because we don't want to suffer the punishment that comes with not doing those things.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about law on my podcast, it really is a system that's designed not to meet human needs, but rather just to serve these domination structures. And the main one, of course, that infringes on freedom is the governmental one. But that's just a manifestation of the prior systems that we experienced, the parental system where it was conditional parenting, where power over was practiced against us rather than win-win and collaboration and honoring needs. And then the school system, of course, is when kids are told they need to go do this and study this and take the test for that, and it's all extrinsic motivation rather than intrinsic, what you really want to do.
Right.
So it's no wonder that we find ourselves in a world system of governments, huh?
Yeah. But then again, most people, especially here in America, would say, "Hey, I'm free. What's the problem? Why are you even bothering talking about this stuff? Like, I'm relatively free. I mean, sure, politicians are, a lot of them are corrupt, and we don't live in a perfect system, but I can go do whatever I want. Like, I'm not restricted here like I would be in, let's say, Saudi Arabia or something, where it would just be no freedom at all."
Yeah, where women get arrested for having a particular nail polish.
Yeah.
Or just nail polish in general, or walking around by themselves, or they can't even drive cars. It's just... Yeah, various cultures have various ridiculous ways to take away freedom, obviously.
Yeah.
So freedom in America, I mean, it does have components that many other countries lack. But at the end of the day, we have this system of regulation and taxation that doesn't really meet needs. It doesn't meet our need for freedom because we're not able to do what we want with our own property in the way we want to do it. And that's kind of the other aspect of freedom, is like property rights, which stems from self-ownership. So if we don't have the sole discretion to do what we want to do with our own property, then how much freedom do we ultimately have? Because people say, well, I own a house, I own this free and clear, I paid off the mortgage. But what about the property taxes that are imposed? And what happens when you don't pay those things? I mean, I know people that have had their houses taken from them because they didn't pay those taxes. Right. And that kind of raises the question as to what those taxes are going to and whether there is any choice in the matter about that. It's the whole system of government is designed to monopolize various services that might be provided in a free market. We don't really know. As my friend Mark Stevens says on his show, The No State Project, he says, what evidence actually is there for people wanting the things that government provides, supposedly, given that they're all coerced, that they're not voluntarily traded in a marketplace like businesses do? Right.
So the difference that you're pointing out is that one is the free market, or the so-called free market, is a voluntary marketplace of interactions where both parties benefit, or they barter, they trade, whatever it is. And then the other side is more of what we have is it's all based on coercion. So no matter what you're doing, the government has something where it's taking a piece of it, or it's demanding that you do it a certain way. So you don't have that full freedom like you would in a free market situation.
Yeah, and then if you look at what government has done to our money, a great little book by Murray Rothbard, Austrian economist, that points out just how devastating it can be when governments are in control of money, of the medium of exchange, and how they just impoverish economies. And the so-called United States of America is definitely experiencing the end result of that,
Yeah.
So it really matters how much freedom we have, and how much freedom is taken away by an organization that really doesn't concern itself with human flourishing.
Well, I'm gonna pull a John Stossel here. Okay, but what about regulations? Don't we need regulations? I mean, if not for regulations, wouldn't like these businesses and corporations just kind of run wild over us and take advantage of people, and you'd have people living out in the streets and all kinds of bad stuff?
Yeah, start doing things like monopolizing services and imposing things on people and then throwing them in cages if they don't do what we say.
Yeah.
Like what's the worst case scenario for corporations? Well, they end up like governments, essentially.
Yeah.
And if, in fact, corporations are a manifestation of government. Governments create these entities and legal fictions, if you will,
right.
And then, have them abide by their wishes. And usually it's this back and forth arrangement between K Street and Wall Street and the White House and Congress.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of freedom in all that context. It's just a bunch of really sacrificing others for the sake of self. That kind of what it sums up politics itself. It's like It's all about human sacrifice, and all this stems from how we really grew up. As far as the regulation goes, what sort of regulations did we have in our childhood? that brought about this line of thinking that without someone else imposing something on us, then we're going to do things that really don't serve life, or other people are going to do things that don't serve life.
Right.
How do we buy into that argument?
Yeah, I was just reading, I was just looking at the that old video by Stefan Molyneux on procrastination. It's a great video. It's like 30 minutes, and he talks about why people procrastinate, and almost everybody does this. I mean, you can hardly run across anyone that doesn't at least have a small problem with procrastination. And he gets into that, and it's exactly what you were just saying, is this kind of domination. It's kind of almost a slave relationship with the way we grow up, because it's not just the parents, but then you go to the schools, and it's all this just doing it because somebody's telling you or making you do it. So it's inevitable that procrastination happens, because it's something that you don't actually intrinsically want to do, but you're being forced to do it. So then it turns later in the life into, okay, I'm just going to put this off, and it's a really tough problem to kind of break through.
Yeah, it's almost like we internalize the external authorities, in our own mind. So we're kind of like this taskmaster with ourselves, saying we should do this, and we're not doing that, so there's something wrong with us. And then we try to put it out of our mind and procrastinate, essentially. We're not going to do this because we're not going to submit to that authority in our own mind even,
Yeah.
So how to achieve freedom really means how to get it inside your own mind, how to free up the various thoughts that you have to not impose these shoulds on ourselves, that are contrary to what we want to do and how we want to live authentically, be connected with ourselves in a way that really honors what's going on, or honors our emotions, honors our mindset, rather than just trying to impose things.
Yeah. Now, you did that series on complete liberty on your podcast on the book by Nathaniel Branden, Breaking Free. And that, I really liked that, because it's sort of like, okay, what do you do now? You went through whatever childhood you had, and then you went through public schools and just constant people telling you, forcing you to do things. And at this point, as an adult, you want to break free. Well, what do you do then? And I think there's a lot of examples of the people that he talked to in that book that were at that point where they're just like, okay, I don't know how to break free. And it wasn't just like breaking free of like politicians or something like that, but it's more like in their mind, just feeling like that feeling of being free, because people are kind of a slave to their emotions and their past and things like that, and that can keep you in kind of sort of a prison, as opposed to actually flourishing and doing your best and actually feeling like you're accomplishing things. And
the inner liberation. And this was a book he wrote in 1970, and he basically relates his experiences with psychotherapy clients in a group therapy setting. And it basically involved issues from their childhoods and how that impacted their present day behaviors and their thoughts and their feelings about things, their beliefs and so forth. And so I think it's really instructive, because so many of us didn't get our needs met as children. And at the beginning of the book, or throughout the book, I basically asked these questions, these 22 questions, which are also listed in Honoring the Self, a subsequent book that he wrote. And they basically relate to, how did you get your needs met, or how did you not get your needs met when you were a child? What sort of things did your parents do that didn't meet various needs? And how did they relate to your inherent curiosity? How did they relate to your sense of freedom? How did they relate to your ability to make choices? How did they relate to, when you did something that was unacceptable to them or that they disapproved of? Did they use guilt? Did they use shame, blame, lots of anger? Did they punish you physically? All these kinds of things really impact our psyche. And if we don't go back and really examine them, especially examine how we interpreted them, and the strategies that we devised to deal with that stuff, because it's widely known in psychology that children tend to internalize the various confusion and anxiety and fears and all that stuff that's happening in their family life. So somehow they think it's their fault that their parents are fighting, or that their parents are mad at them, that there's this conflict, that, whatever it is, kids tend to internalize it, because they, rather than challenge the premises or the way that the parents are behaving, because we just don't have the resources mentally by which to deal with that, nor is it a wise choice sometimes, because our survival is at stake, If we start to contradict what mom and dad are saying, then that can lead to even more punishment even. So it's really important to go back, and this is what Brandon was doing with the clients, to go back and find those times where a person kind of got off on this track of thinking it was their fault, or that humans are bad, that they are bad, all this sort of thinking that takes us away from life. The nonviolent communication trainers call it life alienated thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And these are based on these limiting beliefs that we have to sacrifice some needs for the sake of other needs. For the sake of our survival or our safety, we need to sacrifice our freedom need. That's a real common meme in our culture, right? That we need to be safe, so we need to have the TSA checking everybody's shoes and everything else about them.
Yeah.
And we need to have cops on the street corners and invading people's privacy, breaking into their houses and checking to see if they've got the right plant material.
Right.
It's just so tragic when you look at it from the standpoint of human needs. We don't need to sacrifice this need for freedom. And when we do, we find ourselves in a really deficient environment, both inside ourselves and in the culture at large.
Yeah, completely. And I was actually just reading about this internet sales tax. Did you hear about that?
Internet sales tax. Yeah, I saw something about that.
Yeah, so apparently because the recession isn't bad enough, they're implementing a sales tax that's going to affect everyone. I mean, not just people that have internet businesses, but pretty much everyone, because you start implementing that, and then lots of bad things happen. Jobs are lost, and people become unemployed, and even just having to comply with all those regulations. I mean, what they're doing is saying basically you need to, if you sell things online, you need to pay the sales tax for whatever state you're selling to. So that's
I know big companies have been doing this for a while, right? Like if you purchase an Apple product in the state of California, then they extract that sales tax in your purchase.
Yeah.
So
but this is now, it's going to affect all states, or no matter where you're selling to. It's pretty sad to see that, because that's like you're saying, this stuff goes all the way from childhood to affecting people's ability to produce later on, and that's where I see it affecting so many people. And what do you think is holding them back? I mean, as far as business people and things like that, how do you think this kind of environment holds them back?
Well, I think a lot of it pertains to what Rand called sanction of the victim, where people end up complying sort of unthinkingly because they fear the consequences if they don't comply.
Right.
And I think that really takes us out of being centered with our needs and asserting those needs, because if people were to do that, like Marshall Rosenberg, the founder of Nonviolent Communication, says, when people are in touch with their needs, they don't make very good slaves.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very insightful way of looking at it, because if we live in a society where people just comply, then that's not doing anything to help out the people that are asking for obedience or demanding obedience from us. It's just going to proliferate the amount of demand-oriented thinking, because people are getting their way. They point a gun at you and you say, how high do you want me to jump and when can I come down? And I think with business especially, if there was a little bit of resistance, at least at the outset, against any new rule or regulation or anything like that that's being imposed against people's will, then perhaps we could turn the tide a little bit, where people could voice more of their concerns about the fact that, hey, their need for freedom is really important and their need for choice is really important. And no amount of bureaucracy or any kind of grand plan for humans is worth sacrificing those needs, because, in fact, you can't have any sort of common good when all the individuals within that common good are being sacrificed in some way.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting, because I've been working on some things to kind of reduce whatever I'm paying to governments in general. And one of the things that I found out about is this New Mexico LLC, and there's ways that you can basically reduce your taxes, whatever taxes you're paying to the federal government with the New Mexico LLC. And it's a little bit of strategy involved, but I've told some people about it, and the number one first reaction I get to this is when I say, it's a New Mexico LLC, and you can basically keep your name off of the your business. So your business is just your business name. So they don't require in New Mexico to put your personal name on the documents, on the company documents.
Uh-huh.
So the first question that I've heard from people is, well, how do I pay my taxes? And I'm like, I haven't even mentioned taxes. I'm just talking about you can be anonymous here, but everybody's so worried about the taxes. And I find that interesting because nobody wants to pay them. None of these people that have asked me that, they don't want to pay the taxes, but they're just so in fear of what could happen if I somehow got caught, even though this is totally legal.
And maybe they're afraid of other people in their midst, in their social world, that are for paying taxes for one reason or another. I mean, it's the whole idea of taxation is based on economic fallacy. So if we just go back to Economics 101, whenever you have a transaction where one party does not want to participate, it's not going to be a beneficial transaction for the parties involved. Maybe for one party, but ultimately it's a net loss because people would rather use their money for what they want to use it for, right? So all the things all the money that's extracted from people through taxation would be better spent in the hands of the people that had that money, because they know best what to do with their own money, not a bunch of bureaucrats. And if the rejoinder is that, well, we need these particular services and people wouldn't pay for them without taxation, well, that kind of speaks to how lousy the services are, right?
Yeah,
because people wanted the services, they're going to pay for them, just like everything else in the marketplace. Like if they want groceries, they're going to go down and buy some groceries at a store, and they're going to go to the store that they like the best, that has the best prices or best quality food or what have you. So they make their choices based on their need for freedom, right? Mm-hmm. And win-win exchanges. But somehow we've been hoodwinked into thinking that taxation and regulation and fiat currency are somehow helpful for society, or that we need to sacrifice for the common good. But again, that just begs the question, what is the common good when the individuals are being sacrificed?
Yeah, everybody's getting screwed, but somehow there's this commonality out there that is benefiting from this. But we don't know who that is because we don't know these people or even hear about the success stories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think a lot of it has to do with how we relate to others in our social world and how we confront these various arguments about being sacrificed or not having your need for freedom met in a society that has a government. And unfortunately, all societies on the planet seem to be, on board with this idea of government, at least the majority of people. And it stands to reason because most of those people went to government schools.
Right.
So find me a government school that is against coercing people to do things.
Yeah.
They just don't exist. That would be just completely contradictory to the methodology, right?
Yeah, but wait, Wes, I got a question for you that I'm sure you've never come across, and this is going to just probably deflate your entire argument here.
Sure, it's going to...
What about the roads?
Right?
What about the roads? How in the world would we ever have roads if we weren't paying taxes to some kind of government?
Yeah, and my answer to that is, what about flying cars?
Yeah.
Where's my flying car?
Right.
Where's your flying car?
Yeah, I think that was supposed to be here about 30 years ago.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I've actually worked on roads. I've built roads in various states, working for companies that are contractors for municipalities and so forth, culverts and all that stuff. So it is not rocket science. This is for sure. Now, the question is why do we need to have monopolies, these state-granted monopolies or state-organized monopolies? And of course, that's based on economic fallacies as well. Mm-hmm. It's give you the highest priced good or service at the lowest possible quality.
Yeah.
Just the bare minimum. So people kind of overlook all of the opportunity costs in government running things or trying to run things. And imagine the kind of road systems we would have if they were in private hands, which everything needs to be in the hands of individuals to actually have value in the marketplace. So maybe there wouldn't be some upwards of 40,000 people dying on the roads presently every year in America, and hundreds of thousands of people being maimed and injured.
Yeah.
Maybe that wouldn't even happen because I wouldn't as an owner, I wouldn't want a road system where my customers get killed and maimed. Yeah. And I would find ingenious ways to deal with that problem. And of course, now that we're getting towards the Google car idea of autonomous cars, then that's going to make things much more safe, obviously. But then what's government going to do for the, writing speeding tickets and parking tickets? That's going to be a thing of the past too.
Yeah, and then you got to look at all the people that are going to lose their jobs because they can't go and dole out parking tickets and traffic tickets. I mean, that's there's a downside to it too.
Well, they may see it as a downside, but ultimately it's pretty inspiring because I can't think of anything more disheartening than having to write people tickets.
Yeah, I was driving back on Mission Boulevard here from PB to Mission Beach, and I saw, and you know that stretch. It's about a mile, maybe, the most.
Yeah.
I saw 4 motorcycle cops all along the way at different various points, writing people tickets, traffic tickets, like they pulled them over. And these motorcycles were brand spanking new BMW, like top of the line bikes, and they're sitting there, and it's like, how obvious is this? It's like they're milking everybody they can right now, and it's just
I saw at least a half a dozen coming up through Salt Lake City on the freeway this morning on a Monday. At least a half a dozen pullovers for speeding, obviously, or maybe registration, license. Who knows what kind of dumb issues they were? But yeah, I did see one motorcycle cop, and he had a laptop on his seat, and he was doing something, background check or doing his paperwork. So. Yeah, it's really, really tragic. Once again, it's like we don't need to sacrifice the need for freedom to get our need for safety met. And regardless of all the smoke and mirrors that's being promoted by the mainstream media and, of course, the people that adore the organization of government in some sort of like Stockholm Syndrome way,
Yeah.
They're identifying with their oppressors. So I think it really helps to go back and look inside the self and really explore all those facets of self that didn't really get nurtured when you were a child, and therefore maybe it's hard to see the possibilities of freedom in an unfree world when those things aren't nurtured. But when you do start nurturing these things, all those needs become more pressing, and I think that's what the liberty activist community is really trying to express, is the need for freedom, need for choice, and autonomy is a huge need as well, and that's really synonymous with freedom in many respects. The need for respect, essentially, and fairness.
Yeah.
And those needs are not going to be honored in a system that's coercive and monopolistic and just demand-oriented and punishment-oriented,
Yeah, exactly. Now, I know you got to go in a couple minutes here, but I wanted to kind of wrap up with just going towards what do we do? I mean, in this situation, we're in this situation now, and it's getting, to some degree, it's getting worse. Although you could find examples of why it's getting better in some ways. But let's say at this point you own a business and you kind of are waking up to some of the stuff that's going on around you that is not so healthy and enriching to your life. What do you think someone like that should do? I mean, how do you make the world better?
Yeah, well, personally, I would strive for this process of self-knowledge and self-healing and self-growth. That's one thing. And I have a resources page on happinesscounseling.com that lists all these things and all the podcasts of Breaking Free series and so forth. So it helps to come up to speed with all that information. I call it kind of like an upgrade to your mental operating system.
Yeah.
So once you've done that, then, it's a matter of just finding the niche that you can really sustain yourself and avoid all the big obstacles to your own progress and your own freedom. So I'm a big advocate of agorism or agorism, which is basically operating as if laws don't really exist and flying under the radar in many respects. And, there's also the strategy of doing things within the law that minimize the damage imposed on you. So that's another thing. But then
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin is another example. And then just speaking out, speaking your mind, and really connecting with human needs and voicing your concerns and the anger and frustration and so forth that comes from realizing that so many people are suffering in a society that doesn't have a real understanding of freedom.
Right.
I think every little bit helps, and the more we read, the more podcasts we listen to. I did a series on religion too, and I played a clip from this guy called Thunderfoot, and he's an outspoken atheist, and the title of one of his things was The Internet, Where Religions Come to Die. And, you could say the same thing about government.
Yeah.
The Internet, where governments come to die.
Right.
And
It's true.
I think that's about getting the information and getting that mental upgrade from the system that we were handed early on in our lives. And most of the mainstream press and modern intellectuals are pretty short-sighted about the costs involved in that, and the potential for much more flourishing if we really understood things on a deeper level, you know?
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, that's a good way to wrap it up.
Alrighty.
Yeah, so awesome having you on the show for the episode number 2, and definitely want you back on again. So I'm sure
sounds great.
I'm sure we'll do it again in the future. But again, it's just for the audience. It's Wes Bertrand, and it's complete. His websites are CompleteLiberty.com and HappinessCounseling.com.
Yeah, exactly. And HealthyMindFitBody.com.
Yeah,
we got that up in perpetuity too.
That's
so.
right. That's right.
Thanks a bunch, Kev, and
Cool,
we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for coming on the show. Yeah, we'll talk to you soon.
All righty.
All right.
To freedom. Freedom loving.